Moshe Rabbeinu has this vision at the burning bush, a vision which is the call for him to ascend the mantle of leadership, to take the Jews out of Egypt and ultimately be part of the mission in bringing them toward the goal of entering Eretz Yisrael. The Chumash tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu is with a flock of sheep by the mountain of Chorev, and an angel appeared to him in a blaze of fire from amid the bush, which we call the sneh, which was Boer Ba'esh. He saw, and behold, the bush was burning in the fire, but the bush was not consumed. Moshe thought, I will turn aside now and look at this great sight. Why will the bush not be burned? Hashem saw that he turned aside to see, and God called out from amid the bush and said, Moshe, Moshe. And he replied, Hineni, here I am. He said, do not come closer to here. Remove your shoes from your feet, for the place upon which you stand is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Yitzchak, and the God of Yaakov. Moshe hid his face, for he was afraid to gaze toward Hashem. Hashem said, I have indeed seen the affliction of my people that is in Egypt, and I have heard its outcry because of its taskmasters, for I have known its sufferers, and I shall go and take them out of Egypt, etc., etc. I'd like to focus in Mirz Hashem today, and this is again the beauty of learning how every phrase, every pasuk teaches us worlds of hashkafa, worlds of insight, and direction for our own lives. So I'd like to focus in Mirz Hashem this year on the end of pasuk Vav. After Moshe Rabbeinu turns to see what this amazing sight is about, that the bush is burning but is not consumed, and Hashem tells him this is holy ground, take off your shoes from your feet, which we dealt with last year, Hashem begins his vision, and he introduces himself. He introduces himself as the God of his forefathers. At which point, and here's the phrase we're going to deal with, Vayisater Moshe Panav, Moshe hides his face because he was afraid to gaze toward Hashem. And here, as Rav Munk notes in source number 2, quoting the Albo and Sefer Ikrim, when he first saw the burning bush, Moshe assumed it was a natural occurrence, and he approached it for closer observation. However, when he heard the utterance, I am the God of your father, he became aware that this was no ordinary event. He then hid his face so that his senses should not interfere with the revelation. A human being who tries to use his senses to perceive the abstract actually diminishes his ability to comprehend, and that's what we call a technical level of why Moshe Rabbeinu hid his face. The pasuk, the pshat in the pasuk is he hid his face, as we'll see, for he was afraid to gaze toward Hashem. The question that the Mefarshim ask, this is the question that's raised in the Gemara, is, was it a positive thing that Moshe Rabbeinu did by hiding his face, or was it looked upon with a negative aspect to it? And this is the Gemara. In the Talmud, in Brachos, Daf Zayin, Amud Aleph, Rabbi Yoshua takes a somewhat negative view toward Moshe's gesture. He is of the opinion that Moshe should have taken advantage of God's willingness to reveal himself. Hence, when Moshe finally did entreat Hashem for a glimpse of his glory, he was refused. And the Gemara describes here, it's a very, very strong language. When Moshe Rabbeinu later on asked Hashem, Hareini na kvodecha, show me your glory, Hashem said, right, you can see my back, you can't see my face. The Gemara on this says, Kishiratziti, lo ratzita. Achshav shata rotze, eini rotze. This is quoted in source number 3. God said to Moshe Rabbeinu at that time, later on, after the Chet HaHekel, when Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to see the glory of God, God said, look, when I wanted to show you my glory, where at the burning bush, lo ratzita, you didn't want to look, you hid your face. Now that you want to see my glory, now I don't want it anymore. So according to this, the hiding of the face was negative. He's almost as if punished for it, because you didn't want what I wanted you to, now you can't see later. So we have to understand what was the negative thing about this, and we have to understand a little bit. I mean, obviously there's a lot more to say, a little bit, what does the Gemara mean by this? It's almost as if, well, when I wanted to, you didn't want to. So now that I want to, now you want to, I won't. What is this, like a tit for tat? Like, obviously, chas v'sholom, we can't say that. But obviously, there's so much deeper going on here. What does it mean when Hashem said, I wanted to, and you refused, and now it's too late? We have to understand that that language and that what it means. But then there's another opinion in the Gemara. Rabbi Yonah's son praises Moshe for his modesty, for which he was rewarded, and he saw the image of Hashem. And here we find Rabbi Miller, quoting this in English, said, as reward for 3, he merited 3. As reward for Moshe hid his face, Moshe merited a shining countenance. As reward for he was afraid, he merited, and they were afraid to draw near to him. And as a reward to look, he merited, and he looked upon the image of Hashem, Utunat Hashem Yabid, as we just saw quoted in source 2. So according to this, not only wasn't it negative, he gets rewarded for this. This is amazing. Wow. So we have to ask ourselves, well, which one is it? Is it something negative or is it something positive? Is it something that he's, so to speak, punished for, that he doesn't see the glory of God later? Or is it something he's rewarded for later? How do we understand this very same act being two different, almost completely opposite things? And hence the title, Cryptic Concealment, or another title could be Concealment Considered. We have to understand what is going on here. How do we understand this concealment? So even before we examine the different levels, and again, there's a lot here that we just get a taste, and a taste is a beautiful thing. The Vayavinu Bamikra tells us a yesod here, something very fundamental. He says, when Moshe Rabbeinu is hiding his face, ki yarei me'abid Elokim, because he's afraid to gaze toward Hashem, we shouldn't understand this as the same type of fear that Klal Yisrael had in Mamad Har Sinai, when their souls left them and they were just overcome with fear. But rather, Ki Yarei Mabid Elokim, source 5, in the bracket, Mishum Yiras HaKavod, it's coming out not out of fear, right? Oh my gosh! But rather of Yiras HaKavod, out of the awe, of the honor of Hashem, Umara Hashchina, and the awe and the fear of Hashem's presence. Shala v'yiras haromimut, out of the awe of the greatness of Hashem, not out of fear. And you can understand, Pshat in the pasuk, Moshe hid his face for he was afraid. Afraid means he just had, like gut fear. No, the yira here is yiras haromimut. It's awestruck that he's realizes, who am I? So we'll talk about, to look at the kavod hashchina, the honor and the glory of Hashem, because he says, if it indeed was this knee-jerk reaction of fear, then he wouldn't have gone over to see what's going on, right? He would immediately seen this is like a sight of fear, and he wouldn't even turn to look. The fact that he turned to look means he wasn't afraid of the sight. But when Hashem began speaking to him, then enter this Yiras Haromimus. And therefore he says, he got rewarded for 3 things, because there were 3 different aspects here. One is, he didn't look even though he was able to look, because in the previous pasuk it says, he turned to see. He had this Mara Hashchina, and therefore it was not only that he didn't look, but he covered his face, like, Rivka Imenu, who covered her face when she saw Yitzchak Avinu, this great person. There's a certain amount of modesty that when you see someone great or something great here, Kadosh Baruch Hu's presence, out of anivos, out of modesty, you cover your face. And for everything that he did with an awareness, with a consciousness, he gets rewarded. And on this, Rav Shach in Rosh Hamunah notes something gewaldic in source number 6. He says, why is he getting rewarded for 3 different things when he only did one thing? He didn't look, right? He covered his face, he didn't look. It's really one action. He says, Melamdenu etara shekol tnua v'chol pracha ma'aseh pa'alim u'mashpim aschuyos adam, the arrow in 6. We learn from here that every single act that we do, not looking, covering your face. Every part we get rewarded for. And it's gewaldig. Vayisater Moshe, he covered his face, is a maila achat. Mehabi, because he didn't want to look, is a maila, is another maila. Kiyare, because he had this awe, is another maila. And we see here, al gadlus masei adam, how great human beings are. Al efshariot haptuchot lefanav, on the different options we have, and the achrayus hagdola sherovetz alav, and the tremendous responsibility that we have. That Hashem, who breathed in a living force into our lives, our neshama, is so great that every single thing that we do, every single action, every single movement is measured, and we get rewarded and punished for this. So you think that he only did one thing, why is he getting 3 measures of reward? Because every aspect is rewarded. You know, this is, I think, just parenthetically very important when we're talking about chinuch banim, we're talking about educating our children, that they should see that when they do a mitzvah, and it's difficult for them, the difficulty, or even if it's not difficult, the actions involved get rewarded. So if you ask your kid, please get me a cup of water. So it's the bringing of the cup of water, it's the turning on the faucet, it's the getting the cup. It's all of these aspects are rewarded. And we should realize this. We should realize this because it helps us invest in that which we do, that it shouldn't be just, like a robotic hodgepodge of activities in life, but with a certain amount of awareness and achrayus and responsibility that every single thing we do is weighed, is measured, and is rewarded. Wow! Gewaldig! Like we should be, dancing up and down for joy of what opportunities we have to be able to focus in on all of our actions and realize the consequences and the rewards for everything that we do. Having said this, now that we understand that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't respond out of God fear, but this was out of yiras haromamus, out of awe, we now have to try to understand, was it a positive thing he did or a negative thing that he did? And to try to understand when you wanted to, when I wanted to, you didn't want to, and what that dialogue is about. So let's try to understand from the positive side first. Why, indeed, was this something that is looked upon with such great favor? What was so great about Moshe Rabbeinu hiding his face, and that he's rewarded such? So the Talmud Das, Rav Sternbach, as well as the Drash Moshe, Rav Moshe Feinstein, really echo the same idea. And we see this in Rav Miller in Source 7, that the greatest joy a prophet can have is to receive divine revelation. Yet Moshe was able to refuse even this pleasure, even this privilege. His initial refusal, however, was a prerequisite for his later acceptance in purity. Accepting immediately is indication of being motivated for self-glorification, and in this case, what ultimately loses. There was a certain amount of, appropriately, anivus in Moshe Rabbeinu's response. He felt, who am I to be able to have such a Gilui Shechina, such a revelation of godliness? The way Rav Sternbach describes it, he says, who am I to be able to lead these people? Because that is basically what this vision is about, the Jewish people. Who am I? I'm a nobody. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you know what? It's good to have anivos. It's good to have modesty. But modesty has to be in the right place. And you have to be careful of anivos psula. You have to be careful that when there is a job to be done, and you are the best candidate for the job, don't say, oh, no, I can't do it. A little bit of humility is okay. I'm not sure I'm capable, but you got to step up to the plate. You can't refuse. And that pshat, says the Talmud Das, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, the reason why you want to see my glory is to teach the people that, there's a plan in Hashem's world. I know it's not for you. But you know what, Moshe Rabbeinu? When I wanted you to do something for the good of the people, you said, who am I to be the leader of the people? Now that you want something for the people, I tell you, that humility that you had there, you have to give to the people now. And you have to say to them, you know what? You have to believe, you have to understand that I'm not going to show it to you. You're going to have to believe that there's a greater plan here. You, Moshe Rabbeinu, had the humility when it wasn't appropriate. Now, when you want to get rewarded, so to speak, to be able to tell the people my ways, now the humility is going to have to set in, and you're going to have to tell the people that you can't explain it to them. You don't know. And it wasn't really as a punishment, but this is a state of being. If you are going to use humility can be used against you as well. And this is the lesson that we mamish have to learn here. That there's a place for humility, and there's a place when you are the best candidate, that you have to step up to the plate. A little bit different, but along these lines, there's a medrash which says, in source 10, Rabbi Yoshia Rabba Amma, Yofa Asa Sheistir Panav L'Siftei Chaim, Rav Chaim Friedland, who brings down, it was appropriate what Moshe Rabbeinu did, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I came to show you my face, and you showed me kavod, honor, by hiding your face. Chayecha, I promise that you are going to be with me for 40 days and 40 nights, without eating or drinking, and you will benefit from the Ziv HaShechina, from the divine presence. And that's the idea that Moshe Rabbeinu's face lit up. That's how he benefited from the divine presence. What is this idea? So says the Siftei Chaim, along the lines of this anivos, is that Moshe Rabbeinu said, as long as I'm found in a physical body, I haven't reached the level of an angel. I am not worthy of such an exalted vision of God's presence. And therefore he felt that if he would benefit from this vision, if he would look, he felt that this would be, Vim came Zegufa, he felt there would be, Nizok Megaiva V'Gasav Ruach, it would be an expression of, look how great I am. I get to see the vision of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he felt, I'm not on this level. I haven't reached this yet. This is not appropriate for me to see. And therefore, because of this humility, he was rewarded. He was rewarded that ultimately what? Ultimately, he is almost like divested of his physical body, that he doesn't eat and drink for 40 days, that he has this rendezvous, so to speak, with Hashem. So because he understood his limitation, he understood that who am I to look at this great vision, he indeed is rewarded. Because what is this anivos coming from that he's rewarded? Vim came the end of 10, Zegufa kvot shamayim lastir panav ma'bi pnei elokim, adifo leharbot beyirat shamayim milarot pnei shechina. Moshe Rabbeinu, in a very calculated way, said, it's better, because I don't feel that I'm on this level of being worthy, to be more careful about Yiras Shamayim, more careful about being circumspect in what I see, and being sure that I am on the level deserving of seeing this, than overstepping my boundaries to see the Pnei Shechina. And on this, his reward for hiding his face because of this Yiras Shamayim is a reward for being able to understand the importance of what Yiras Shamayim is. And that's the lesson that Chazal are trying to teach us by all these great rewards that Moshe Rabbeinu got. That when push comes to shove, the bottom line in life is Yiras Shamayim. You have to have this awe of heaven. And this is why we have the idea of Atah Yisrael, the bracket in 12, Ma Hashem Lokecha Shomimcha Kim Liyirat Hashem Lokecha. What does Hashem want? He wants Yiras Shamayim. He wants awe of Hashem. And therefore we have why Chazal have instituted so many chumros and so many siyagim and so many fences. Because if you have Yiras Shamayim, you're afraid of overstepping any bound, not to anger God, God forbid. So when Moshe Rabbeinu sees this great sight, he has almost like a tug of war. Should I look? I'm really not on the level of looking. Therefore, what's more appropriate is to show awe of Hashem at this moment, to show how important Yiras Shamayim is, how I stand in awe of Hashem and I don't overstep my bounds. And he quotes here the Siftei Chaim, the arrow in 12, from the Saba of Kelm, where the Saba of Kelm says, and this is a wonderful imagery to keep in our repertoire. He says, if you have a very precious vessel, a kli yakar, right, a fancy crystal vase, or whatever it is, it's very fragile. Right? And it came in inheritance from last, 5,000 years. I mean, obviously not, but whatever. And it's at the edge of the table. It's not over the edge, it's just at the edge of the table. Will you go over and move it into a more secure place? The answer is yes. It's not at the edge of the table, you're right. But it's close enough that I'm afraid that something may happen. He said that's how we have to look at our lives. Even if we're in a situation where we're not even thinking that maybe we'll go over something in the Torah, and it's a chashash rachok, and somebody may pass by, and at the speed and the velocity they're moving, it may cause friction for it to fall. That's enough of a fear. Let me move it. That's the type of awareness that we need to have when it comes to the mitzvahs of the Torah. And that's why, as we've spoken about before, when we're able, la'richet hayirat shamayim in 13, when we recognize that yirat shamayim is so precious for us, it's worth all cost to be able to get this. We understand that Moshe Rabbeinu, hiding his face, was ready, levater al gilui shechina, beginning of 13, the asterisk, he's ready to forego this great spiritual pleasure, bishvil liknot yirat shamayim, in order to have this fear of heaven, because this is the most fundamental aspect that we can acquire. Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching us. You think it's this great, Gilui Hashem? No, what's even greater is Yiras Shamayim. And that's why, as we've spoken about, how careful we have to be to learn halacha. If we want to be careful not to go over on Hashem's will, so we have to know what Hashem's will is. And to say to ourselves, well, I have a yeshiva education for the first 12, 14 years of my life, and that should suffice, we're totally off base. Halacha is so detailed, it's so complicated, that you could spend your whole life, men, women, children, just learning halacha, and still not be fluent in it, and still need to go over it again, right? You can learn, 2 halachas a day of Shmiras HaLashon, and you can do the same 2 halachas your whole life, and you will never tire of it, because it keeps you on guard. That during the day, when you hear something, when you say something, you say to yourself, is that part of what I just read this morning? Is that over on? Let me be more careful about what I say. Hilchos Shabbos, Hilchos Kashrus, Hilchos Brachos. There's no end to what you can learn. That's why, there's an idea that a person who learns halachas every day, al tikrid halichos olalom, ela halachos olalom, that you're ben olam haba. And there's a fact that, I'm not promoting one over the other. I just will share what I personally have every day, aside from the other learning, that an email, of Ben Olam Haba email, where it's called Ben Olam Haba, where it sends you a halacha, 2 halachas a day. It sends you a little question and answer every day, and a musar board every day. It's a wonderful way to begin your day. Halacha, an awareness, some musar, some insights, even the practical halacha, even though you have to ask your own shaila, enables you to be thinking along these lines. Learning halacha is about learning and ensuring that vase doesn't fall. It's about Yiras Shamayim. That, my friends, is level number 1. Level number 2 looks at this story from a whole different vantage point. The Siach Yaakov Blau asks in source number 14, what exactly was this Mare Elokim? What was this vision? So I understand that on the first level, the vision is somewhat of a revelation of godliness. What exactly it was, we don't know. The burning bush, that God reveals himself, and he's afraid of looking at that. But says the Siach Yaakov, no, there's something much more fundamental that was going on in this interchange, and that allows us an understanding of why understand why Moshe Rabbeinu did what he did. And that is what the Sneh was about. When Moshe Rabbeinu, his whole life, he was always wondering, are the Jews worthy of being redeemed or not? What is going to be the ultimate, destiny of the Jewish people? To which this Mara, this revelation responds to. The Sneh, we know, is representing Klal Yisrael in Golus. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu coming down, mitoch hasneh, from within the midst of the bush, is the idea, as Rashi tells us, Imo Anochi B'tzara, that Hashem is with us in our suffering. And that's why generally he notes that when you have a name repeated in Chumash, when Hashem says Avraham, Avraham, or Yaakov, Yaakov, there's like a break, there's like a line between the two. Avraham, Avraham, psik. By Moshe Rabbeinu here it says Moshe, Moshe without a break. Why? It's as if you're calling somebody, come quick, quick, quick. Why? Because it was what HaKadosh Baruch Hu envisioned was allowing Moshe Rabbeinu to see this vision of the sneh, to see this vision of Kivyochel, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with them in their tsar, and that when he would see the Mechazeh, Mizazeh, when he would see this earth-shattering sight, Yifros Miyam Bechi Marvin Nora, he would burst out crying and daven for the Tsar of Shechina and daven for the Tsar of Klal Yisrael. He would daven for the pain. And on this level, his tears would take away the heaviness of Galus and the pain of Klal Yisrael. As the Baal HaTurim notes in 16a, there are two places that you have in the Masorah of Vayisater to hide. Our pasuk and a pasuk in Eov to hide misery from my eyes. Had Moshe Rabbeinu davened at this time, then the misery would have been hidden from his eyes and we would not have gone into Galus. And this is how he explained Pshat. Ki yarei ma'abid el Elokim. He wasn't afraid of looking. He was afraid of lahabit. Lahabit, as the pasuk habet na shamayma, has an understanding of 17 of looking from above to below. Lirot is like, parallel on the same course. Habata is looking from a vantage point. He was afraid of looking out of the honor of Hashem and looking into the sneh. The example he gives is, if a child sees their father or parent who falls from a rock and lands, flat on their face, parent won't look. They're too embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for the shame of my father. They turn away. Moshe Rabbeinu, when he saw that Kivyochel HaKadosh Baruch Hu was in pain, that experience was so overwhelming for him. Yarei Ma'abid, he was afraid to look. He says, I can't see this vision. And that's why Hashem says to him later on, Moshe Rabbeinu, when I asked you to look, I meant for you to look in order to daven. And had you done that, then now when you're asking me, Hareini na kvodecha, show me your ways, you wouldn't have needed to ask me, because all of the exile would have been terminated, and there wouldn't have been pain in this world, and there wouldn't have been evil. When I wanted you to see in order to daven, that was the opportunity to take everything away. Now when you're asking me to see, it's too late. The pain is there, the exile is there, and now you can't see, you can't change. The opportunity was lost. So on this level, this is why we have, on the one hand, it's positive. What he did was the appropriate thing of not feeling that he felt it was inappropriate for him to be looking at something as intense as this. So on the one hand, he is rewarded for this because of this Yiras Shamayim and this anivos and this humility that we spoke about. But on the same hand, this very act itself is critiqued, because had he been able to look, had he been able to see, then Jewish history and the world would have been different. And it's both running at the same time. So on the first level, he's not looking out of anivos, out of humility, out of his Yiras Shamayim, out of his fear of heaven. And this is the appropriate aspect for us to gain in our lives. On the second level, he's afraid to look, habata, because he feels that this sight is just too overwhelming to see Kivyochel, the Tzara Shechina, the pain of God, and therefore he doesn't daven. And because of that, Klal Yisrael remain, so to speak, caught in the bush and are not able to be extricated, and Golus becomes exile in eventuality. It's interesting to note, perhaps on a parenthetical level, that obviously the lesson that we learn from this second level is the enormous weight that tefillah for others places on our shoulders, that we mamish have to daven for others. And is it not fascinating, again parenthetically, that the Medrash says, Chachamim bring down, that Moshe Rabbeinu had Klal Yisrael daven for him. Not only himself, as Chanan, he davened 515 times, Nicha. But at Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people davened for him, he would have entered Eretz Yisrael. So you almost see here like a Mida Keneged Mida, him, on his level, not davening when he was supposed to for Klal Yisrael. Ultimately, and the redemption doesn't happen, ultimately Klal Yisrael don't daven for him. Right? And the personal redemption for him doesn't happen. And on this second level, my friends, when you hear of a tzara, when you hear of a tragedy, when you hear of something that of refuah, parnasa, daven for the person. You may not be able to heal them, you may not be able to give them a shidduch, you may not be able to give them a job or money, but you could always daven for somebody, you could always feel the pain of somebody. And that feeling of the pain is Moshe, right here, no break. Come, help alleviate this pain. You know, it reminds me, I was sharing with my students an encounter that I had with somebody last week who was telling me how they have a very, very sick child who, Apiderach Hateva, medically isn't going to make it beyond, toddler stage. So I was telling the story to my students in one of my classes for whatever reason that it fit into the material. And after I told them the story, I turned to the class and I said, okay, now I want you to ask me something. So one kid says, why does God do this? I said, that's not the question. We don't know why. Another kid asked another question, and I said to them, stop. I said, right now you should all have one thing on your mind. And they're looking at me like blankly, like what? And finally, one kid in the corner says, what is her Tehillim name for us to daven for this little child? I said, that was the question I was waiting for. That is the mark of a Yid. That we're Rachmanim by Shanim Gomle Chasadim. When we hear a story, we don't only philosophize, we don't only say, oh, isn't that terrible? But our job and our response has to be, what is the Tehillim name that I can daven for this person? And that is what the second level is about, of the Moshe. How can you take off the burden of somebody else? To feel the pain by breaking out and crying and davening for them. Third level, my friends. The vision wasn't a vision of tsar. It was a vision of glory of Hashem. It was a vision that Moshe Rabbeinu was going to be able to perceive. The Medrash describes greatness of Hashem, to be able to understand the upper worlds and the lower world, and to understand how things were happening. This wasn't just a vision of fire in a bush. This was going to behold like visions of understanding the secrets of the world. So why does he want to look? So explains the Mishchat Shem and Rav Kaufman, based on the Sfas Emes, the following idea in source number 20. Moshe Rabbeinu knew that this was an opportunity of unmatched. Hashem would reveal the upper and lower world. Ella Shacheni Notenet. But that's exactly the reason he didn't want to look. Bishvil sheyadal amaylos v'niskavot sheyachol liskot mishum zeh achein hiniach otam v'lo ratza lasigam ofen hazeh v'atam ki lo ratza liskot basagot shelo amal aleihem. Moshe Rabbeinu knew he was about to get a gift, incredible sights, but he also knew he didn't work for it. He knew he didn't earn it. He knew it didn't come from himself. He only wanted to see visions that he worked for, that he earned, that he deserved. Why is he rewarded? He's rewarded because he understands the power of his own effort. He's rewarded because he understands that what you work for and what you earn is far better than free gifts. Now we all know, my friend, and the Mishchat Shemin goes on to explain, that we are all, at different parts of our lives, have flashes of inspiration. Sometimes they're literally flashes, and sometimes they last for an extended period of time, where we're on fire and we're on a high, and everything makes so much sense to us, and we understand why we're here in this world, and we feel Hashem's presence in our life, and we feel so connected, and everything is just amazing. And then one day we wake up and it's all gone. And we say, oh my gosh, what happened? And like we enter into this, depressed, despair state of, oh my, what's going to be? And the reason why is because we didn't deserve it. We didn't earn it. This is gifts from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we have to recognize that just as a gift comes, a gift goes. Mipnei shemasha Adam 21, zocheh l'lo yikiyah b'ama, the double underline, that which we get without working hard. Eino niknetz lo b'kinyan bar kayama v'lo nikva v'omet nafsho. It doesn't become part of you. That you can't use it for the future times. It's a gift that quickly, or at some point, dissipates. Hence in 22a and b, Klal Yisrael had the greatest sights at Mamad Har Sinai. Amazing! And afterwards, 40 days later, they have the Chet Hegel. How could that happen? Because if it doesn't become part of you, if you haven't integrated, you haven't worked at it enough, it comes and it goes. And clearly, that which you work for, the Davar 24, Habab Avodas Ha'adam, says our Friedlander, according to Sasemes, Kayam La'ad, becomes ours forever. Davar Shemakabel Matana Lulav, Sitzo Bekalud, Ve'ein Ze Nishmaret Flo Kokach. And that is why we have to understand that our job is, as we mentioned before, to work on Yira Shamayim, an awareness. Yira, the Mefarshim say it's the same as letters as Re'iyah, to see Hashem. To be able to feel Hashem in all aspects of our lives, not only intellectually, but emotionally. There's a pasuk in the squiggly of 25 that Rav Dessler has a beautiful word on. The pasuk says in Eov, Hein Yirat Hashem hi chochma. The fear of God is wisdom, which is Rav Dessler says, when our wisdom is not in our heart, it's only up here intellectually, then it's like a donkey who carries books. But it's not part of you. But it's only when it becomes part of you do you have Yiras Shamayim, do you have awe of heaven. A person, and we know this, my friends, and we all know this, a person can learn and can study and can know and can quote verbatim, but if it hasn't become part of their blood, it hasn't become part of their mindset, and they haven't worked it through in being who they are, so then it's limited. Intellectually, they know a lot, but they don't act on this. And there's a great disconnect between the head and the heart. Our job is to make it part of us. The Chochmah of Yiras Hashem. So continues the Mishchat Shemin in 26. If these moments or episodes of inspiration are so short-lived and they're very limited in their effectiveness, so then why does God bother inspiring us? And all of us are inspired, and all of us have these moments of highs. So he says, and this is very important, we have these moments to know what we are able to achieve. We have these moments that we should have a hishtaukakus, a desire to get there. And he says, Ein ze ela hashalash HaKadosh Baruch Hu mashil lo harazu, the bracket in 26, Hashem lends us this, that we should feel the sweetness of the avoda. And then we would want to reach these levels. Because it's only to the extent of where and when you know what you're capable of reaching that you're going to work hard at this, that you're going to want to get there. So why does Hashem inspire us? He inspires us to know where we can reach, to know where we can go, and to feel the sweetness. When we feel the sweetness of davening, we say, I want to get back there. I have a desire for that. But what is our challenge? To be able to take that inspiration and make it part and parcel of ourselves. Don't say, I have to reach that level again. You may never, right? Lo alacha machal ligmor. It's not up for us to finish it. As Meiri on this says in 27, don't ever say, well, I'm not going to begin my avoda because I know I'll never reach there. No! Your job isn't to reach there. Your job is to try to do the best you can. Our job is to put in the effort. And once we put in the effort, then we're going to see tremendous yata d'shmaya, tremendous help from above, that we're going to go leaps and bounds in ways that we've never imagined. And this is the great pshat at 28 of the Sfas Emes on the bracha that Yitzchak Avinu gives Yaakov. The bracha is v'yitein l'cha Elokim, and God should give you right mital shemayim mishmanei aretz, from dew of the heaven and the fat of the land. Rashi says, why Elokim is din. If you're worthy, you'll get them. And if you're not worthy, you won't get the bracha. Well, hold on a second. If he's not worthy, then why even bless him? What's the point of the bracha? Right? If he's worthy, Mamela, he'll get it. And if he's not worthy, he won't get it. So why bother blessing him? Says the Sfas Emes, you know what the blessing is for? The blessing is for that we should open up the petach kechudo shomachad. The blessing is for that we should take the initiative, that we should be deserving of blessing. That we should take the initiative, that we will have the ability to take that small step, that we open the pathways for Hashem to continue to bless us, that we're deserving of this blessing. And it's hard. And this is the third level. If the first level is Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't look because of his humility, sometimes humility is called for, sometimes not. But clearly Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, I'm not yet on this level. That Yirah Shamayim, that awe of heaven, is something that is commendable. And therefore, the lesson for us to learn on the first level is how careful we have to be to make sure that that vase doesn't fall over. Learn halacha, be able to be rooted in knowing what to do. On the second level, Moshe Rabbeinu has an opportunity to daven and to see the Sarah Shechina. It's too overwhelming for him. Out of his respect of this awesome sight, and out of it's inappropriate to look, he hides his face. And you're right, the golus ensues, but nevertheless, we understand why he did this as bringing an appropriate response of a child to a parent. Here, halachakam v'kama to Kadosh Baruch Hu. The lesson on the second level, the first is learning halacha and keeping our Yirah Shamayim, our Kedarim, our fences. The second lesson is how careful we have to be that we feel the pain of others and we daven for them. Moshe, no break. Extricate me right now. Daven. This is how important it is. You hear about someone, whatever situation they're in, say a small tefillah for them. They have a child who's sick, they have a parnas, whatever it is. Say a small tefillah. The third level, the importance of effort. The importance of investing of ourselves. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm ready to forego all these great visions, all these great secrets of the world, because I haven't worked for it. And I don't want a free gift. And I want to work for it. I want to make it mine. Why does Hashem indeed inspire us to know what we can reach? And indeed, Moshe Rabbeinu is able to reach these great visions and these great heights. And he reaches it having earned it. Karan or Panav, it becomes part of his face. It becomes part of who he was. He realized at that time he wasn't deserving. Later, after he works on himself, he does become deserving. Our challenge in life is to take that first step. Is to realize that when we are inspired, to be able to take that inspiration and make it part and parcel of who we are, to grab these opportunities, to make ourselves worthy of that first step, that we don't say, well, forget it. No, let me do a little bit. I may not learn all of halacha. Let me start with 2 halachas a day. Let me build. Let me start with one part of tefillah with kavanah. That petach, yechudo shamachat, as the opening of an eye's needle, is the steps that we need to take. Now, if according to all of this, what Moshe Rabbeinu did was so great, so why is it that Chazal are so critical of him and say, it wasn't good that you did? When you wanted, when I wanted, you didn't want. What's the criticism here? It seems he had a lot of awe and respect, and it was all appropriate, and he wanted to make his own opinion, his own revelation, and make it his. What was wrong? So Siftei Chaim tells us something that, and a lot of the Sfarim mention it. Moshe hints at this earlier, and he says the following. Third, it wasn't right what you did. It wasn't good. Even though you did it from Yirah Shamayim. Why? You're right. When you get something that you didn't work on, you get it as a chesed, not because you're deserving, you get it as a gift. But You're right, based on where you were standing. Your fear was correct. You didn't deserve it. And that's why you get rewarded for that, because you were right for where you were standing. You made the appropriate decision. But however, if you were on a higher level, if you had worked on yourself, then indeed you would have gotten it based on what you deserved and not as a gift. What are we holding him responsible on the level of Moshe Rabbeinu? That he should have worked on himself at that moment to be worthy of this vision, that it was on his level. And that's why he is critiqued. You should have. When I ask you, and you refuse me, your response should have been, I want to get to this level. I want to reach this greatness. And this is what the Birkas Mordechai Ezrachi speaks about. He says, Lilamdechan 31 in the asterisk, Ki kishaharatzon kayam, when the desire is there, mitgabrim af ala Ki yarei mabid el Hashem, you're able to overcome that awe, being awestruck of God. If inochachta ki yarei mabid beino omed mashma lo nitbala sat aratzita, if you feel that you are not capable of this level, it means that your level of desiring to see Hashem wasn't high enough, wasn't strong enough. Kishenitbaleta. If you really had the ambition, the desire was so strong within you, you would have been able to leap to these great heights, and you would have been able to see, and you would have been able to see deserving of seeing. And that is the lesson that we learned from Moshe Rabbeinu. What a lesson. Again, on the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, where you were at, you acted correctly. What's the critique? That at that moment you should have said, wow, Hashem is appearing to me. I want to be on this level. I want to deserve this. To take that step forward and say inwardly, Hashem, help me be deserving of this. Help me that I should be zocheh for this. But there's even something more, says Rav Mordechai Ezrachi in Birkas Mordechai. Later on, when Moshe Rabbeinu, in fact, works on himself and he wants to see Hashem, Hashem says, sorry, it's too late. Why? Because there are moments in time that don't repeat themselves again. This was a moment of inception. This was a moment where Moshe Rabbeinu was beginning his course. This was the time to have as a vision the highest goals, the highest aims. This was the time to grab that opportunity. Now that you didn't grab it then, it's too late now to have that same revelation. Sha'atam yuchedet shel hayeshiva hi zot hanitbat mimoshe Rabbeinu alav shalom. L'sha'a zot ein tashlumim. What is he being critiqued for? What I wanted, you didn't want. I gave you a gewaltic opportunity at the beginning of your career, so to speak. You didn't grab it. Now it's too late. As Rabbi Tat speaks about in Living Inspired, the Gemara there records 33 an opinion that Moshe hid his face. Previously was afraid to look, he did nothing wrong. His behavior was appropriate and praiseworthy. This is not a punishment, but that was the time, and you missed it. This is not a time. What a lesson in missed opportunities. Shir Shirim states, I am sleeping, but my heart is awake. I hear the sound of my beloved knocking. Open for me, my sister, my beloved, my dove, my pure one. I have taken off my coat. Should I put it on again? I have washed my feet. Shall I soil them? And then, after delaying, I rose to open for my beloved. V'dodi chamak avar, but my beloved was gone. A brief laziness, an opportunity lost. That knock at the door must be answered. How does one know which is the moment? How does one become sensitive to one's opportunities? We understand that Hashem never gives us difficulties too profound for us to utilize. If we're meant to use an opportunity, will be given a sufficient hint, each according to his or her sensitivity. For the highly developed, the hint may be subtle. When Elisha was a young man plowing his father's field on a particular day, and Eliyahu Hanavi came by, he passed by, he cast his cloak over Elisha. That was enough. This was the cloak that Eliyahu hid his face in a few days earlier in the scene of Har Sinai where he felt Hashem's presence. Elisha bade his parents farewell and followed the man who had just become his master and went on to become one of the greatest prophets. Aderes Eliyahu, the cloak of Eliyahu, that was enough. The hint, the gesture must be taken seriously. Elisha knew some things have meaning. I cannot ignore the call. This is that famous story of the Talmidim of the Arizal who are standing Erev Shabbos in Tzfat by the hills, and the Arizal says, now it's time to go to Yerushalayim to greet Mashiach. And somebody says, I just have to tell my wife. And he says, the time is gone. Dodi chamak avar. There are opportunities in life that have to be grabbed. And this is what we have to understand. That when we don't grab those opportunities, we may have similar situations later in life, and we may be able to even deal with them appropriately. But we've missed the moment. And that same moment will never come back, and the implications of that same moment will never come back again. And that's why we have to live our lives with this type of vigilance, of being able to realize that when opportunities knock at our doors, we have to ask ourselves, why is this opportunity knocking right now? And if we're lazy and we dray and this and that, we've lost it. This is what this parsha is teaching us about. But even more importantly, and this is the idea in 34, the Peninei Das, he says, Mitzadach Mailas Hayira Shamosha Shlamro Godel Tshuka Vashifa Shamosha Benu Lasig Hadargos Bechochma Gavra Yira. Yes, his Yiras Hashem was so great. But after all of this, Haksifa Va'ava Ladat Hashem B'mida Yoter Nala Haya Mitkaber La Yira V'zochel Asago Naros Gedolos V'lachein Lo Yafel Samosha. But he missed out. If he had really wanted this experience of closeness to Hashem, his Yiras Hashem would have just been able to be a distance in the past. He would be able to overcome it. It would just go and fade into the background, and the desire and love for Hashem would overcome. And my friends, I think on this level, the message for us to learn, obviously, is to grab the moment. But I think the second lesson that we need to learn of this is to be able to ask ourselves, do we have passion? Do we have ambitions? Do we have desires? What Moshe Rabbeinu is on his level being critiqued for is he didn't have enough of that passion at that moment. Because the passion itself, the desire itself, you're already halfway there in reaching your goal. And this is what Rav Dessler speaks about in Mechtav Eliyahu, Chelek Gimel. He says, when a person sets up for themselves a certain goal, to reach somewhere, or to be able to acquire a mailah mimailos hanefet, a certain level, even though they know it's going to be hard, and you're going to have to work very hard at it. But if you say, after all my hard work, I know I'm going to reach there, that bitachon, that sense of security in itself proves that to some extent you've already reached there. And likewise he says in 37a, when a person is not successful in accomplishing something, and that you have these awakenings and you're not able to bring them to fruition, Al yashlo tanu yetzara kilo chisaram biyachola bekol shalanu. Don't be fooled by our evil inclination who says, what do you want? You're not able. You're a pasha yeh. What do you expect from yourself? No, that's not the problem. That's not the reason why we're not successful. If you really desire something, and you really feel you'll reach it, that in itself enables you to reach this, and in the end you'll be successful. If you feel that you're not successful, the problem isn't your yecholet, the problem is in your ability. Alav ladat shechaser b'mitat shifato. The problem is you weren't secure enough and developed enough in that which you were desiring. And this, my friends, I think is such a crucial lesson for our lives. You know, as the statement goes, it's not that we're not successful in achieving our spiritual goals. We're not successful in having spiritual goals to achieve. And that's our problem. Do we long and yearn to reach certain heights? Moshe Rabbeinu, had he stood at that maimad, at that experience, and say, wow, I long for this, I yearn for this to a certain extent, he would have been there right then and been able to receive it and get it. Do we stand in our own lives, albeit we don't have these, major experiences necessarily, we have major ones, do we long for certain things? Do we have a sense of where we're going? And here, Rav Orlowick, in turning ideas into actions, gives us a very important parameters in setting up our she'ifas, our desires. He says, a person must say, who am I? If I measure my successes or failures on the basis of others, that's not me. If I measure my successes or failures on the basis of what I do, that's also not me. Much of what I do or don't do is actually a result of my environment and education. None of this is really me. As I often tell my students, you run a race against no one in life. When examining our lives to see if we're achieving our potential, we must be especially careful not to judge ourselves based on someone else's accomplishment. After all, the metric tells us, can a person see his comrade in the world to come? So who is the real you? 3 keys. 1, the importance of tests. You are what you choose. The Gesher Chaim says that the only true I is what I choose. My choices define who I am. My choices are unique to me, reflecting what is expected of me and what I can and cannot do. When I do only what I've been brought up to do, I haven't found the real me. I found my parents. It's only when I'm confronted by a test, something that doesn't come easily because of my genetic background, my upbringing, the habits I've developed, and must choose how to respond, then I can find the real me. 2, effort. The measure of a person is willingness to work. My portion of anything I accomplish is really only the effort I invested in trying to achieve my goal. And 3, you have to realize that you have a unique task for what you are here for. It may not neatly mealy. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? As the Sasemis explains, that my life's work can be done by no one but me. My friends, when I understand, and this is hard to live by, because most of us define ourselves by what we do. We define ourselves in relationship to others. I define myself based on purely external things. I haven't found myself. When I understand that I am what I choose, I understand that I am where I put my effort, I understand that I am because I have a unique task that no one else can have, then I've tapped into the core me. And when I've tapped into the core me, then I can begin looking and asking, well now, where does this core me want to go? Where does this core me want to achieve? How can I make something of my life? Not just because I was habituated into doing this and I'll continue doing this, but what is unique to me? When I have that glimpse into the core me, that is the stepping stone then to have these she'ifas, to have these desires, to have these visions that I want to accomplish, that I want to be able to define who this me is. And when I have that vision, then I have that pitchuli petach kechudo shamachar, I have that opening that will be granted that siyata d'shmaya to be successful. So my friends, what we try to see today, again, always fascinating to look at any phrase, any pasuk in Chumash, and see worldviews. Moshe Rabbeinu hiding his face, it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. It was calculated out of awe. On the one hand, he gets tremendously rewarded. Yira Shamayim, fear of heaven, is amazing. His anivos, when it's placed correctly, is a tremendous aspect. Yes, we need to work on our Yira Shamayim, guarding our vas. 2, recognize the importance of davening, of feeling the pain. He didn't want lahabit. He felt it was inappropriate to see. He lost the opportunity. When I wanted to show you, you didn't want to see. Now, you can't see. Now Golus is going to be an inevitable aspect of the Jewish people. 2nd level, to feel the pain of another Moshe, no break, and go and daven for somebody else. On the third level, we have to work. These moments of inspiration are to get us to places, to realize how great we are, where we can go, but it's not us. It's not real. We have to earn it ourselves. Moshe Rabbeinu said, I need to earn this. I can't just take this as a gift, and he's rewarded for that, and later it becomes part of him. Ki karan or panah. On the fourth level, no. Yes, you're all right, and yes, he's rewarded. But had at that moment he had such great she'ifa, had he had at that moment such a great desire, had he had at that moment the ratzon latzik dvarim gedolim ka'elu, as the Drash Moshe said, he had that desire to see such great things, nothing would have stood in his way, and he would have been able to receive this not as a gift, but mitzad adin, from what was deserving of him. On this level, we need to understand, grab those moments of opportunity. Don't allow the Shir Shirim imagery to say, I'm too lazy, I'm too tired. When something happens, open that door right away. Take that opportunity to see what you can learn. And two, get to know yourself. Who is the core you? And when you're able to discover the core you, then you can ask, what is this core you yearn for in this world? What are your she'ifos? What are your ambitions? Where do you hope to be? Because if you don't have these ambitions, you're not going to have real success in life. And you're going to constantly fall. It has to be backed up with a deep desire to become a different person, a greater person. And when we have that petach, kechudo shamacha, when we have these desires, we have this yearning, and we take a little bit step forward, then we have the tremendous siyata d'shmaya. Moshe Rabbeinu took a step forward to see the bush. Hashem saw he took a step forward, and he granted him this vision. We too need to take these steps forwards in life to be able to be granted the siyata d'shmaya, the help from heaven, that we can be the best that we can be, grab the opportunities that are granted to us, and that we are able to have this ability of standing in awe at all times of the presence of the Kadosh Baruch Hu.